All right, lads, welcome back to my podcast, Cheaper Than Therapy. Mick Thomas here. How are you? Not all enthusiastic today, right? Not at all. Not asking for the subscribes and shit like that. Yeah, a good friend of mine. I want to talk about him. A good friend of mine on Friday passed away, and everybody pretty much knows, anybody who's listened to this from the comedy community. Carl LaBove, or Carl LaBove, some people pronounce it different. Passed away on Friday of prostate cancer, and he'd been fighting with prostate cancer for years. And he passed away on Friday. And I kind of didn't want to do a silly podcast and all that stuff, but I just said I'll put a quick episode out this week about Carl and talk a little bit about him, because just kind of what he meant to me. If you don't know who Carl LaBove is, there's reasons for you don't know him, but Carl LaBove kind of got the shit end of the stick in life, was dealt a shitty hand. And that's why you don't know him, if you don't know who he is, because he should have been, a household name. To me, he should be on the Mount Rushmore of comedians. I grew up in Ireland, as you know, and the only comedian I knew was Billy Connolly, right? It was kind of the only comedian that they had in Europe, and then you had a few more came along throughout, the years and stuff. So, but when I came to America, I was on this the first American comedian I saw was Eddie Murphy in Delirious in a video. It was from a video van. A guy would drive around to your neighborhood and you would just get a video van. And I ended up getting Delirious with Eddie Murphy, and then I needed to know all about American stand-up. You have to understand, I'm a child at the time. I know a child shouldn't be watching Eddie Murphy's Delirious, which is still one of my favorite comedy specials. So when I came to America, I had this hunger to find out about American stand-up. I wanted to learn from it. I wanted to find out, who were the American Billy Connollys. And you go down this rabbit hole of George Carlin, Richard Pryor, of course, and now you see now you've got like Bill Burr and Louis C.K. and Brian Regan. Their name always comes up with being the greatest comics of all time, but also who comes up in conversation is Sam Kinison. And Sam Kinison, you can't talk about Sam Kinison without talking about Carl LaBove. They came up together through, both from Texas, and they're best friends, inseparable. Sam Kinison died in Carl's arms when he was in that car accident, and you gotta go look it up. I'm not gonna go into detail about that much about Sam Kinison on this, but if you Google, on YouTube, the story, The Death of Sam Kinison, he fell out of the car into Carl's arms, and Carl kind of talked him through his final moments in life. That's how close they were. So I kind of, I went on this rampage of like this thirst for American comedy knowledge and history, and I came across Carl LaBove. And if you think there's YouTube stuff out there of Carl LaBove of stand-up, there's not. There's clips of stand-up but it's not really what it is. To see what Carl LaBove was on stage, you had to be in a room where he was on stage. Video will never translate it. YouTube will never translate. And that goes for all comedy, I think, but especially for Carl. So I got a phone call. I was doing comedy a wet day. I mean, by wet day, like 2 or 3 years in, 4 years in maybe. And I got a phone call from Governor's Comedy Club to go and open up to MC, not even open up, for Carl LaBove. And I went, yes. I knew I had plans that night, but I just said, don't give up that spot. Let me get back to you. And called him back within minutes. I canceled my plans just to make sure. And I called up the club and I went, listen, I want to work with Carl LaBove all weekend. And that was it. That was it. And then I met Carl for the first time in the green room of Governors. And from that minute on, we became friends. Now there's a lot of comics. You'll see them online. They'll go, oh, my friend passed away, my friend. And that's how they looked at their relationship with Carl. And Carl did that for people. Carl made you think that you were, not think as in, is in a mischievous way, but the relationship and the energy and the love you got from Carl LaBove, you felt that he was your friend from the second, from the get-go. And so I went up and I brought him up on stage and I ran out from the green room all around the floor to watch his set. And I'd never seen stand-up comedy like that in my life. I never did. He rips the room apart. I mean, ripped it apart harder to this day. And I'm doing comedy 14, almost 15 years now. To this day, I've yet to see somebody rip a room apart like Carl did that night, and every other night I got a chance to work with him. There's none out there like it. And I've seen them all. I've seen all the greats. I've been in rooms with all the greats. And I've never seen anybody rip a room apart like what Carl did. And then he did this thing at the end of the show where it was when you had a headache from laughing, like a fucking vicious headache from laughing. I went out to the room again to watch because I thought he was done, but he went back out on stage and he took a guitar with him and he sat on the stage and he strummed the guitar. And he told these stories of the road, and every audience, there was people putting their jackets on to leave because they thought the show was over. And Carl came back out, and then the jackets came off. People got on the phone. Fuck you, babysitter. I'm right. And I'd never seen anything like it. And he sat there and he just strummed the guitar, and the spotlight was on him. And he just told these stories of like Rodney Dangerfield and all these things. And we were friends from then on, right? Like the next day he calls me up and he complimented me on my set, and and I'm not going to make this about me, but he complimented me on the set, and then he said, hey man, I would love to hang out because we talked about golf, and we went down, we played golf the next day. It was a summer day and we played golf somewhere out east on Long Island, and Carl was an amazing golfer. Like the thing about Carl is that in a celebrity contest, which I didn't know this, in the top two celebrities for celebrity golf was Alice Cooper, right? That might, you might be very kind of shocked to hear that. And then Carl LaBove. And I have this, and I talked about it with my friends the last time we played golf. I have this, I think it's called a hook. Slice to the left, hook to the right. So I think of a hook, and I play it to that hook, and I turn my body all the way over here, and I hit the ball, and it curls in. And Carl immediately went, no, dude, this, that, the other, man. And he, his California accent, and he corrected the posture, and then immediately banged the ball straight as an arrow. And I can't remember what he showed me. I can't remember what he taught me because about 2 years went by, and I hadn't played golf again. I forgot what he showed me, but he corrected it like right. He was just an amazing golfer. But from then on, we were friends. He would come to my house, play with my kids. He would have dinner at my house, and and then he would just like we drove everywhere together because Carl didn't have a license. Now the reason why Carl didn't have a license, now you can go on to Mark Maron, what the fuck WTF podcast from 2011. He interviewed Carl, and I recommend you go back and listen to that episode because he talks about a lot of stuff I'm going to kind of brush over. But Carl and Sam Kinison were, like I said, inseparable. And Sam Kinison was selling out Madison Square Garden, only theaters, only massive arenas. And of course, Carl LaBove was on that show. Both of them were on that show, inseparable. And Carl had a 3-year-old daughter, and he got a phone call that after Sam had passed away, he got a phone call, and it was his ex-wife at the time, and she said, now Now, I'm not going to go into details about this because it's kind of Carl's story, and I don't want to say something that legally might get me in trouble in case I misquote. And a lot of this stuff is what Carl told me, and you can listen to it on the kind of the details of that on Mark Maron. We talked about some of the details, but he went into like a lot of specifics with me. And again, I'm so whatever I tell you is what was repeated to me. But so the daughter was like 3 years old, maybe 4, and the wife said it to him. His ex-wife said to him that the baby's not yours, it's Sam's. It's Sam's. So his best friend had got his wife pregnant. And now Sam couldn't tell him. Sam didn't know what to do about it. So Carl, obviously being crushed and in a downward spiral, went off the rails a little bit, right? Now he obviously goes, well, I'm not paying child support. And the weird thing about the child support was he was paying, because he was making like over 100 grand a year from theaters and arenas. He was making over 100 grand a year. Now he wasn't, the child support was like 2-3 grand. He didn't have that kind of money a week. He didn't have that money coming anymore. Why? Because he wasn't working with Sam anymore. He never came up through the club. Like he didn't know comedy clubs. He only went he did his time at comedy clubs, but he only went like to theaters. So he didn't have those connections in comedy clubs. He didn't have agents, didn't have managers and that kind of stuff to speak up for him. So he had no work. And then what would happen is like, he'd been in a bunch of movies, TV shows like Seinfeld, Roseanne. He was good pals with Jim Carrey, Robin Williams. And what happened was in the state of California, they garnished his wages. They garnished his wages, so now he couldn't work. Right? He couldn't go on auditions. He lost his driver's license because California take your license, your passport. So he couldn't get any shows, and any shows he got, the government would just take the fucking money from him. And he couldn't do any. Like, he couldn't be Carl LaBove. He couldn't go out with that fucking talent and earn money like he should have. Like you should all know who he is by now. That's what I mean by he got dealt a shitty hand. None of it was his fault. He didn't have to pay, and he shouldn't have to fucking pay child support for something like that. But that's for another episode, I guess, when we could talk about laws and that kind of stuff. But so Carl, he lost it all. He lost it all, and then he ended up on Long Island because he couldn't drive to gigs and stuff. And I became almost like his driver, right? Whenever he got small gigs here and there, and comedy clubs would cut him out. Comedy clubs wouldn't hire him because they knew the IRS was looking for him. So like he got fucking blacklisted. Because they didn't want the government knocking on their door saying, you're hiring this guy, he owes us money, are you paying him under the table? You know what I mean? Because like, he was on Howard Stern and all the dates were posted online. And that's where people knew where he was going to be. That's where the government knew where he was going to be. And so Carl ended up on Long Island. And that's, that's where I met him, of course. And that's where we became fucking friends. And we he lived with a friend in Bish or Mark Lund. But I would go over to the house and Carl would just be sitting there strumming a guitar, smoking weed. I would sit with him. I don't smoke weed, but I would sit with him and just watch him play guitar. And he's one of the reasons I play guitar today, actually. And I was with Carl. Well, I actually met the daughter. I met the girl. I don't want to mention her name, but it's common knowledge, of course, but you could look it up. Spitting image of Sam. Oh my God, she was a spitting image of Sam. So she came into the room and Carl gave her this, like, as a gift, this beautiful guitar. And I just remember just stuff like that. And I remember like, being there when we go for a drive, for example, and just like listening to his story, just how he looked at things, man. He was just like, we would listen to the Doors together because I'm a big Doors fan, and but like he would listen to it like slightly different than you. He would hear stuff in it that you never heard, and like you listen to the song Riders of the Storm, and he's like, listen, man, it's like, listen to Rob Manzarek. Look, he's playing the rain on the piano. He's playing the raindrops, and you listen like, and you're like, doodle doodle, and you're like, fuck yeah, he's like. he looked at things different. But I would go to the city a lot, and I would do some spots. And if I was at the comic strip, when I was just kind of recently, I was new to the comic strip, and Carl would come in, and all these comics would be just all over him because they knew who he was. And Carl would come in with me, and he would sit in the back of the room and just watch my set. And Carl wouldn't even have a set that night. Carl wouldn't have a set in any club in the city. He just wanted to come and hang out and watch my sets. And we would he would watch the set, and then after the set we would go to Central Park, and we would walk, and he would talk about my set and what he liked and what maybe I might want to, like, never say what he didn't like. That's just how he was. It was like, here's what I like about your set, and here's what you might, let's do it different. Like, if you try this, move this here, move that there. But we would walk for hours, man. He would tell me these fucking stories, like these just stories that, because again, he was like, coming up in the 80s and the 90s, like he was fucking just like one of the biggest things ever. And he would tell you stories about hanging out with Paul McCartney, and he told me this one story about like how he helped Sting cheat on his wife, but they got caught because they had the conversation and the baby monitor was on, and him and Sting got caught, and he was trying to help Sting. He's trying to help Sting cheat on his wife, and he would talk about. He told me one of the coolest stories about Robin Williams when Carl was a doorman, and Robin Williams would come in, and Carl's favorite comic was Robin Williams, and he just wanted to be like Robin Williams. Mork and Mindy was out when Carl was starting stand up, and Carl and Robin have that energy, like you know what I mean. Again, if you've never seen them, you'll never get that taste of what I'm talking about online. You can look, you can try, but you won't get it. And he would talk about Robin Williams, and Carl was a doorman at the Comedy Store. I hope it was the store, or else the Laugh Factory, but I think it was the Comedy Store. And Robin Williams would come in. Robin Williams was Mork at the time, right? He was Robin Williams, and he would walk in, and Carl thought the way he saw where Robin Williams come in, do a line of coke, do his set, and leave. And Carl thought, well, the way for me to meet him is if I bring him coke. So Carl brought in cocaine, and Robin Williams showed up, and he's like, "Hey, Robin, I got some of this." And Robin's like, hey, oh. And they would go into the office, and they would do a line, and all of a sudden they were buddies, right? And this happened every night. And then one night, Robin Williams came in, and Carl didn't have anything. And Robin was like, "Oh, okay," and left Carl alone. And then Carl was like, "Hey man, I'm sorry. I thought you'd be different." And Robin Williams said to him, like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I just thought, I guess you only kind of wanted to be friends just because I gave you coke." And then Robin Williams just said to him, he stopped, and he brought him back into the office, and he was like, "Hey man, look, everybody just wants to do cocaine with me. They want to party with me. Nobody really wants to hang with me like the real me." He goes, "So I'm so sorry if that's, if I came across that way." And then from then on, him and Robin Williams became really good friends, to the point where Robin Williams had this reputation of stealing material. Of course, I never got a chance to see any of that stuff, but him and Carl were driving to the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, and Carl was telling him Robin Williams' funny story about something that just happened to him. So Carl is in the green room at Johnny Carson at the Tonight Show, and Robin is on stage sitting at the couch. He's not even in stand-up anymore. He's too big for stand-up. He was just straight to the couch. He was a guest now, not like a comedian doing a spot on late night. And Robin Williams just broke out into the story that Carl just told him, and Carl just got up and left. He got up and left, and he walked out, and he hadn't seen Robin in years. And then all this shit happened at all this shit happened with Sam Kinison. Carl lost everything, He couldn't get a car. He couldn't get an apartment because nobody, he couldn't get a sign. So he meets Robin Williams one night, and Robin Williams like, "Hey man, I got back to the green room and you were gone. Like, what happened?" He was like, you took my material and I just didn't like it. And if you're going to willing to do that with my material, what else might you do with our friendship? And Robin was like, I'm sorry. What can I do to make it up for you? And Carl says, "You could help me get an apartment. Could you co-sign on an apartment for me?" And Robin Williams gave him a 2-bedroom condo. Gave him the keys to it. It was one of Robin's. It wasn't like he didn't buy it for him, or but he just goes, here's the keys. Go live there. And he lived for I think 2 or 3 years in Robin Williams' 2-bedroom condo. Um, man, but like I said, we walked around and we just for hours upon hours, just telling me stories like that. And he was such a good man, and he was just he was like full of like, and his last message, which I posted on my page, his last public message was him from back in October when he knew he only had he didn't have much longer to go, and we text back and forth. We talked towards the end, and text more so towards the end. I just don't think he liked talking because it was a struggle to talk on the phone. But his last message was like just of on YouTube was just of love, and I think I have I remember the last time I texted him, which was just a few weeks ago. Let me see it. Just who he was, and I just the message was, oh yeah, just like, how you doing, man? He's like, good days as of late. How you kicking? I go, that's great to hear. Anything I can do for you? And he goes, no, good thoughts are working fine. Big smiley face. From all my friends, I appreciate your friendship and thoughts. And I went, always, man. Please reach out. But his last message. Anyway. Anyway, like I said, I don't I don't believe in heaven and hell and all that shit, but it'd be cool, man, to hang out again. Anyway, if you get a chance, go check out LaBove stuff, read his stories. All right. Cheers for listening.